welcome to a developer's guide to HCP Vault. This is part 1 of our 5-part series. We are keeping it a little bit more straightforward for a few reasons. Not any problem, but you might have already noticed that we have a Getting Into Vault series, right? This is not titled a Getting Into series for a couple reasons. We were going to title it Getting Into, but then it got confusing to say like Getting Into Vault for developers. So it's a developer's guide. We do have Getting Into Vault if you're a platform engineer or someone who's going to be operating Vault. We do have a series for that. So go to hashi.co/getting-into-vault. That is our playlist that officially has it. But this is a series for developers, or if you're a platform engineer who has to offer Vault as a service for your developers, this is some information on what your developers need to know, right? I think one of the most common questions we get are, how do I enable my developers to use Vault? What are the sort of minimum things I need to be teaching them? I don't even know the patterns from a developer perspective. And so hopefully if you're a platform engineer tuning into this, or a security engineer tuning into this, and you're responsible for your Vault deployment, this gives you a sense of what information you should be providing to developers. And if you are a developer, which we want to hear from in the chat, what kind of developer you are, because this will be a popularity contest on what programming language we show. If you are a developer and you want to learn a little bit more about how to inject secrets from Vault into your application, we are going to have some opportunities for that. So this is a shorter series, but hopefully it gives you an opportunity to understand how you can use Vault within an application. So we're not going to go into operations at scale. Again, we had a series for that. So, but just check out that series. If something's missing, we'll fill it in. I'm Rosemary. I am one of the developer advocates at HashiCorp. Here with me is Michael. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Kosir. I am also a developer advocate here at HashiCorp. Yeah. And Rosemary and I are excited to talk about Vault.
Yeah, we both have experiences being the people who set up Vault and maybe the people who also use Vault. So both sides of the equation. And so it's easy to set up Vault sometimes. No, it's not easy. Why did I say that? It's not easy to set up Vault. It's not that easy to set up Vault, although, it's easy to set up HCP Vault, which is the cloud offering, because you pretty much just click and then you get Vault. But the other half of the equation is usually about adoption of Vault within an organization. And Vault is a secrets manager at the end of the day. It does change some patterns that you might have in applications, which is why you have to be a little bit more careful and more thoughtful about how this changes your application. Michael, I don't know if there are any experiences you've had with folks who have brought Vault into organizations and have struggled to help developers onboard onto it. But, I know you've certainly had some times where you've had to teach development communities, right, about how to use Vault properly.
Right, absolutely. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to integrate Vault and the secrets within Vault into your applications, which I think we'll get into later in the series here. And even, Rosemary, you and I even wrote a blog post about kind of how to bring Vault into your organization and kind of standardize adoption. So that's another good call out there.
Yeah. We do want you to participate in chat. So while it might be a slower Monday morning stream, we're keeping it easy going with our coffees and tea in the case of Michael. I finished my coffee, so I'm like forlorn.
I'm still drinking my tea here in my Hashi Talks 2022 mug.
Oh, nice. See, I have the 2023 one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're branded. That's good. That's good. Keep in mind, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. We're happy to answer them live. If there is something that you really want to see and you don't have a chance to see it in the series, do let us know as well. We want to know what else we can teach you and what other information we can provide, especially if you are trying to introduce secrets into your applications. And so if you are missing any of the other series, there are other series that we have. There's one going for Boundary that we are going to be starting up again. There is a series for Console and many of the others. So if you would like to learn more, feel free to check that out. But we are going to be focusing on using HCP Vault, which, as I mentioned before, is the cloud offering for Vault. It is equivalent to the Vault Community Edition, Vault Enterprise. with some minor changes, but basically you can create a Vault cluster. The cloud platform will run it for you, and all you do is connect to that Vault instance. It makes it a little bit easier so you don't have to handle the operational aspects of keeping a Vault cluster up and running. And we are trying to show this from a developer perspective, which is why we're not going to go through the full setup of Vault. But we are going to show HCP Vault, which has some of the enterprise features that are important, especially if you're scaling this across a really large organization. So if you're a developer and you could care less about secrets management or secrets manager, you may find that your Vault team uses certain terms. And so we're going to go through what those terms are and how they may or may not have set up, right, based on their organization. There are some variations between how people want to set up Vault. So it's not going to be perfect, right? So do talk to your internal Vault team as to how they've set up their Vault for you. And you may not even be aware that they use Vault. You know, that's also a possibility too. So don't be alarmed.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of abstractions out there of, you know, people build kind of front ends, kind of internal front ends on top of Vault. So you might be using some kind of internal secrets tool, but then under the hood, you know, it's actually Vault.
Yeah. So you might be like, I don't understand some of this. This is not like how my secrets management workflow works in my organization. And that's perfectly fine. We're talking about some of the patterns though. So you might not find too much information in part 1, but as we get to part 2 and part 3, in which we actually talk about injection and synchronization of secrets as patterns for your application, that might be more useful just so you have a general patterns perspective on how your application is supposed to be handling rotating secrets. And I guess the real reason why we started this series was that we got a lot of questions about people just saying, I have an application that right now it just starts up and it gets a secret, right? I was told that I have to move to some secrets manager. Doesn't really matter what it is. And now I have an application that reaches out to a third-party service. I don't know how to be caching that secret. I don't really know what retry behaviors I should be including in the application. I don't really know what happens if, let's say, I change the secret in the secrets manager. How does my application even know, like, how does it know that it's changed? And I think, Michael, there's the simple solution, which is restarting the application.
Yes. A full restart. You know, let's take our application offline and restart it. So with that approach, I think you'll take some downtime a little bit. So that might not be preferred.
Yeah.
But there are definitely other ways to do that to stay online.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, no one wants to say their application had some downtime because they rotated a secret, especially because we're moving toward, I'm not a secure person, so you're the security expert, but especially if we're moving toward a different kind of compliance requirement, right? Where it's like we're being more vigilant about rotating our secrets on a regular cadence, on a scheduled cadence. So it's not quite as scalable to say, I'm going to take down my application every month and then bring it back up. Maybe if you're in a containerized environment, this isn't as much of an issue, right? It's more horizontally scalable. You could restart it and it's perfectly fine. But there are other applications that you can't have any real significant downtime, and it's not possible to necessarily restart the application. All right. So we did a lot of talking. Let's just talk about Vault now. I did promise that we talk about Vault. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm going to click that. All right. So this is Vault. Wow. So amazing. We have to log into it. I guess I'll show kind of HCP Vault in general. Your team, your Vault teams, or if you're a platform engineer, you may or may not find that you use this. And I have to sign in. Sorry, everybody, because we are doing this today. But you may find that your teams don't really use this, and that's fine. But you will have some variation of Vault. And this time we're showing Vault Dedicated. And Vault Dedicated is the basically the cloud offering of Vault proper. There are other kinds of offerings as well, but we are just going to be focusing on Vault Dedicated today. And as a developer, what kind of interfaces, what kind of things you should be doing. So first thing is that we have a cluster dedicated, a cluster allocated already. I'm going to switch my organization. And this is, again, a structure that is mostly for HCP Vault. So your Vault team may have different organizations and different projects that they're using. You'll notice that our group has a lot of different projects going on. And so getting into HCP Vault is the project that we're going to be working in. and we already have a Vault cluster up. There's a couple things to know. Again, if you're a developer, you won't really probably care about this. You may never see this interface. You may never know what is going on here. But for the most part, networking is set up. We have a cluster tier called Plus. Important reason we're doing this is because we are going to be talking about secret sync, which is something we don't talk about. We haven't really talked about that much, but secret sync is the ability to synchronize from a secrets manager like Vault to some kind of other service. So it could be another secrets manager. It could be GitHub. It could be something else. We're going to be talking about secret sync, and you do need Plus for that. So as a developer, you probably just get the URL to Vault, right? Someone will say, okay, you want to store secrets? Here, store the secret in Vault. I don't know, Michael, if you've encountered other ways that people offer offer an interface for someone to store a static secret, but that's like, I think the most straightforward getting started experience you can offer to someone.
Right. Yeah. You go, here's the UI, go log in. Usually in some cases, it's through like LDAP authentication or something like that. Some kind of human authentication for users or developers to log in and store their secret within Vault.
Yeah. So if you're a platform engineer watching this and you're saying, well, I don't know if I want to offer my developers the ability to log in by username and password to Vault. I mean, inherently, you have to store your static secret. You have to offer an interface for someone to store their static secret, whether you do it through infrastructure as code, whether you do it through a UI, a separate UI, a developer portal or platform, however you want to do it. At the end of the day, someone needs the interface to store what is called a static secret. A static secret doesn't really change. You go to an API somewhere, generate an API token, and you copy paste it and you store it into a secrets manager, right? And so that's manually managed. That's all done by keys and values. That's it. So the result is that whether or not you let someone do this through infrastructure as code or you do it through a UI, you do have to offer some kind of human authentication so that you gate who is allowed to store which secret where. We have set up GitHub authentication, which I think most folks are probably not necessarily going to use GitHub authentication because it requires a personal access token. But it's a good example of saying, like, I'm tying a different identity provider to Vault and using that to log in and provide access. So Michael and I are the only ones who can access this Vault cluster as sort of our own user because we have a team in GitHub set up. That's just the two of us. And so we're just going to use our personal access token to log in. I think do you have any other suggestions, thoughts, Michael, on setting up groups and how you allow them to access Vault, or if you're a developer?
I think that you brought up a good point of that. In this case, we're using GitHub because GitHub is tying our users and teams, and so kind of that identity lives outside of Vault. You can also see that with LDAP or Active Directory, Okta as well. You have groups or teams, and nested in there are people. And then you can connect those to Vault and then assign different roles or policies based on what team or what role that you're in.
Yeah. And so the other thing that you might encounter when you're logging into Vault is the namespace. We're in an admin namespace right now, but you could also add other namespaces, right? We don't have the ability to, we're not authorized as developers, so we won't be able to do it. But your Vault team may have I would say like an application landing zone, for lack of a better word, where they'll set up something that's isolated for your application. Now, there's two ways to think about this. You may hear something like Vault namespaces, where it's sort of this nested structure of, okay, here's like admin or like the top level namespace, and I will add child namespaces on top of that, right? And that might subdivide based on your business unit, that might subdivide based on your development team, things like that. Things that isolate your secrets away from other development teams. Other times you'll see in, let's say, Vault Community Edition, you might find that you've done this, your team might have done this a different way, where they've done it by secrets engine paths. So every, what they call secrets engine in Vault is a mount in which it stores a secret. And every mount you can have paths as well as child paths on top of that. So this right now is just payments, but I could also have payments dev, payments prod, isolate the two separately, or I could have, I don't know, Michael's team, Rosemary's team. We can just do it by secrets.
You could split it by function, departments, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may find those two separate segments, I would say segmentation models in your Vault cluster. So it sort of depends on what your platform team thought about and how they want to subdivide, as well as how your organization subdivides access. And so I guess like the most straightforward thing is to say, let's just store a secret. And you can go in here and you can create a secret. You'll create a secret under the payments path, under the payments mount, and you can actually have subpaths within your secret as well. So we can say like API token /dev. You might decide your Vault team might tell you we subdivide non-prod and prod Vault clusters. So you might not be able to do this for like dev, or you might not do dev prod. You might do another one that's like API token QA. So we'll say secret data. What kind of secret data do you want to put in here? A token?
Yeah.
Token.
Username, token, API token.
Yeah, we can do that. Something like that. And then, okay, we'll just add that. And you can have multiple keys and values, right? So it's not just token. If you want to say like, maybe it's a payments application in, I don't know, we could say payments. What are other payments applications? Payments processor application. You've got a token, maybe you've got a database password, something like that. And then a database username. We can do something like that. You can have multiple values. So as a developer, you could decide that you want to add multiple. You could decide that you want to have, each one is its own secret. It sort of depends on how you want to pull the information in your application. And it also sort of depends on how what your application is doing, right? What framework you're using. So in this case, just to make it easier for myself, I like to share the secrets that are shared across one application, sort of in the same kind of keys and values together, knowing that they're all going to use the same. So if I do need to rotate, I know where to look rather than separately store everything in different places. But there's a compelling reason for you to decide to, let's say, split database and username into a different secret, I guess. If you don't want everybody accessing that database username and password.
Right. I was going to say like access control, maybe some part of your team only needs access to the token, and then other parts of the team need access to the database username and password. And then your application, if you store those on two different kind of paths, then your application, you can write a policy that grants your application access to both, but then the human users or the developers that are kind of storing those, you can then split those out separately as well. But
yeah,
just like Rosemary did here, I kind of like to just, throw it all in one kind of application path.
Yeah, just for now, especially if you're not sure, you can always decouple it. But once you start splitting it up and you split into multiple places, then it becomes a little bit harder to identify, right? Like where you've put it all.
Right. And these are static secrets again. So that's kind of that key and value, or that the KV engine that we're using. So the key value store.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's some metadata. You may or may not need this for your application. Usually it doesn't matter necessarily, but your Vault team may set some policies, like you're only allowed to keep 5 versions of the secret, and we'll delete it after, a certain number of days, right? Just from a security perspective. But, I think it kind of just depends on, again, your security team and your Vault team and how they determine what policies they want to put in place for you. But usually you'll have some kind of secrets engine mount set up with some key value store, and you can decide what you want to create within that key value store. You can alternatively create a new version of the secret. So we had a database password, and then I can say it's a different username, different password. Let's say everything else stays the same, but you'll see there's a diff now. So I'll show you.
Look, it even shows the diff. I learned something new.
Yeah, we're showing this password in plain text. Everybody's going to cry inside. They're like, why are you showing this plain text? Don't worry. These don't actually go.
We're just storing arbitrary data.
Yeah, we're just storing some data so that you get to see like what are things as a developer you might view if you were using the Vault UI. We have a question in chat. Is this SaaS or can do on-prem? Yes. So you can do both. This one that we are showing is HCP Vault, which is Vault on our cloud platform, but you can deploy Vault Enterprise, which is on-prem, so you can do the same, the same set of things. So you will also see namespaces. You will also see certain other features as well. So both of them have very similar features. We are just showing the cloud version because we don't need to set up Vault for ourselves right now.
Right. This stream is more for developers, developer oriented. So we're kind of skipping all of the steps of deploying Vault, on-prem or within your own data center.
Yeah, exactly. So conveniently, it does tell you if you're a developer and you're like, how many versions of this secret do I have? There are 2 versions, right? So you'll be able to see there are 2 versions. You can update the latest version. You could create a new version. You can copy them all if you want in JSON format as well. That will show it all in plain text for you. And so I would say that some of the most common questions that I get if you're a developer and you're not necessarily using the Vault UI, you might be saying like, oh, my Vault team or my security team doesn't let me see all of these values. Well, they probably don't, because some of them may or may not belong to your team to use. So you may only have access to certain parts of Vault. So for example, do I have access to look at token? Oh, yes, I do. So for example, oh no, I'm not authorized. So I don't have the ability to look at it. I gotta, hold on, let me log out. We can log out.
Log back in as like an admin.
Yeah, I'm gonna log in as an admin, which is a different login entirely. For anybody who's like looking at this being like, what is going on? I am logging in as an admin, which is a different auth.
Yes, which as a developer you should not be doing.
Yeah, you theoretically should not have. You might not have access to this. So, but your team, your Vault team, probably has created a policy. So if you're part of the dev payments team, like Michael and myself are as developers, we can only create, read, update, delete, list, and patch under the payments path. So if I try to look for other policies, if I try to explore Vault, I won't be able to read anything else, right? I think I actually attached a read-only policy too. Yeah, read-only. So, and this will allow me to read any other secrets engines, but I can't get any secrets from those secrets engines, right? So that's one thing to know. And let's see. What are some other things that we should know about storing a secret and rotating a secret, Michael, that I've completely forgotten in this?
Did we talk about how maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but we have 2 different versions, and our application is you are able to specify which version of that secret that you're wanting. So like you might have an application somewhere and you can specify, hey, I want version 1 of the secret, and it will always pull version 1, or you can tell your application to always pull the latest secret.
That's right.
So there are some edge cases there where you want to actually tell your application which version to pull. But I think typically, or most commonly that I see, is that people are just pulling whatever the latest version is.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing that we're going to do that was not fully planned. And by the way, none of this is fully planned. So you like if you see mistakes, it's because sometimes we just make mistakes.
It's a Monday morning. It's all right.
It's a Monday morning. What I'm actually going to show is how you do this by API, right? Because I think it's most of the time you probably wouldn't necessarily be doing this by API or by CLI, but it's important to know if you are if your Vault team and yourselves are early in your adoption process, or you're just getting used to Vault in general, you might not get this that early, right? You might not have these interfaces all perfect and aligned. And so you may just have to do some of this through CLI. You might find yourself sort of needing to debug. So we're going to show how you get this secret, just get it out by API and CLI, because there is an API available and there is a CLI available. We'll start by Vault CLI first, because that's kind of the easier way to debug, I guess. Okay, so the first thing is that as a developer, what's a little bit different than doing this through a UI is that you do have a Vault login method. So it will prompt you for a username and a password and go through any auth workflow, right, that you decide. So that's one thing to know. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because this is actually a personal
copy
access.
your personal. So this is while Rosemary's doing that, what she's doing now is on the command line, which is the exact same thing she was doing in the web UI.
Yeah.
So in the web UI, she had the little drop down, and she was able to, select GitHub authentication method, and then, paste in her token in the UI in the browser, and then hit login. Here we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it from the command line.
Yeah. And you'll notice this does print it out, but it's only 1 hour long. So by the time the stream ends, I don't know if you'll be able to use this token. What happens is that the workflow is it will have human auth. And then once you authenticate with the identity provider that your Vault team has set up, it will return a Vault token. And then you'll use that Vault token for any subsequent requests, right? Whether it be by CLI or by API. And it will tell you exactly how long duration you have, and that's 1 hour. And then the remainder, will tell you some of the policies attached to it. And in this case, you'll notice that there is some metadata or some information about the GitHub organization that is tied to this identity. So this HashiCorp Dev Advocates, and then my GitHub handle. So the general workflow, and that's pretty standard across any human authentication you might do against Vault, is you authenticate using your username password that you might use for your identity provider, and you'll get back a token, and you'll use that token for everything else that you might need to do in Vault.
Right. So, and I think that might be for developers, that maybe that's a paradigm shift where some third-party applications, you generate an API key, and then you can just keep using that API key forever. And so something that's unique or maybe special or different about Vault is that, nothing is necessarily forever. As you saw, that Vault token expires in 1 hour. And so that really kind of forces you in a security mindset of, least privilege. I don't want my token living forever. I want to rotate it, and then things like that.
You mean I can't keep this around for like 10 years?
No. Vault, So that's the great thing about Vault, right? You have your kind of static credentials of like your username or password or GitHub access token, and that for the most part is static, but then you're trading that for a temporary credential, which, in the long term is more secure.
Yeah. So basically it's limiting the blast radius of what someone can do if they did get that access to that credential, right? Like if just because you get this Vault token, if someone did take this Vault token and decide to log into our Vault cluster, Michael, they're just going to find some secrets in there, and it's going to limit what secrets they find. And that's these database password, database username, and API token that go nowhere. So, they're not going to get access to any of the other secrets we might have stored in it, or they're not going to get access to GitHub itself. They just now only have access to Vault itself for the 1 hour duration.
Right. They can access our little, our fun little secret data that we store that doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. That's okay. That's okay. You can still get something. So there, if you're a developer, once you authenticate to Vault, it stores it into your token helper. If you're on Linux, you may have to set some things for yourself. But for Windows and Mac, I believe it stores it into a helper. So you don't need to set anything else, but I can't remember. So one thing is about Vault Secrets List. Vault Secrets List will list all of the secrets engines you have access to. So you have payments, you have identity, you have Cubbyhole. We're not going to talk about Cubbyhole. But there's some other sort of default ones that you set up. You can also do secrets enable. So you could if you have permissions, you could set up your own secrets engine. Like if I tried to say, I'll try to do plugin name KVV2 test, it will, I think it's KV, right? Something like that. Well, it's already enabled. So you might let me do it, right, at a different path, which is KV, right? So there are a couple of reasons for you to decide, not to do one way or the other, or to decide like you're going to allow, your Vault team might allow you to create secrets engines, right? And you're responsible for curating and organizing your secrets engines as a result. Kind of up to you.
Yeah, and I could see it being in different environments. Maybe your Vault platform team kind of locks down production, and you can't create secrets engines or anything there, like that's controlled by another team. But maybe if you have like a dev or non-prod Vault cluster, where developers can use that as a playground. They can enable secrets engines, store their own things. So I've seen different things at different organizations as well.
Yeah.
Or so if you're trying to do this, locally as well, you can follow along, enable these, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of however many permissions you do have, balanced with whatever permissions your Vault team might have offered to you on your production cluster. So just keep that in mind. But you'll also notice that there's a way for you to get the secret. So you could do Vault KV get. This is there are ways that you can do this in CLI without using the Vault KV get CLI. Like you could just go to the API path. This KV is kind of just nice, to quote some of the Boundary team, syntactic sugar as a CLI, just to be like, make it easier to retrieve something from the KV. So we're just going to get from the payments app. Let's see if it will app payments data. No, long listing. Get payments. What was it that we named it? Dev, right? It was payments dev. Payments dev. Processor dev. That's right.
Processor, yeah.
Yeah. So you do have to put the whole path. So that's the path of the mount. And then you have to put the name of the secret, which you might have any number of hierarchies that you have to include. But we're using KV v2. There is a KV version 1. KV version 2 is highly recommended because it has versioning. That's pretty much the biggest reason why you might want to use it. And so you would have this data path that you would access by API. This is something that I have to reemphasize because it confuses a lot of developers who do want to store their secrets in Vault and are like, what is going on here? The API path in key value secrets engine version 2 has a data in it. It does not, if you're trying to access it by CLI, it's implicit. So that's why you don't see me typing it, but it does exist as an API. So if you do have permissions or you do have things that you want to access by API, you do have to reference the data path.
Right. And I think that goes back to you're using the Vault KV get command, which, as you said, was the syntactic sugar. So that's kind of handling that data for you, right?
Yeah.
Where if you were to just do like a Vault read itself, then you would have to manually put that data parameter.
Yeah, exactly. And I can say I only want version 1. Oops, I guess I have to do that beforehand. I do want just version 1, right? So I don't want version 2. And this is what Michael was mentioning before. If I just want to do version 1, I can just print out version 1 and get that back. It will tell me there's version 1 right here. So there are ways in which you can get previous versions. If you're doing like a secrets rotation, your application, you're not using the patterns that we're showing or the frameworks that we're showing later on in this series, and you're doing this all manually, you may decide I'm just going to retrieve version 1 for a little bit and then roll. Once I have a new version 2, then I'll rotate and move everything to version 2 and then delete version 1. You could be more gradual and more deliberate about it if you are rotating your secrets manually. So that's one pattern for why you would want to use versioning and why you would keep them around. So that's CLI. If you did want to put new secrets, we could put a new secret. So payments, processor,
dev,
QA. We'll do QA.
Yeah, QA.
QA, and then I think I have to find the value. Hold on. Putting the input in. Here we
I
go.
think you could just do key equals.
So like, key equals, yeah.
Foo equals bar or something.
Yeah, we'll do foo bar because I don't feel like typing databases.
Typing a whole like API, a fake API key out.
Yeah. Check and set parameter required. Where's the check and set parameter? Did I accidentally?
Oh, I think,
yeah. CAS. CAS. Gotta put this as. Okay, CAS. Yeah, because it doesn't exist yet, I have to tell it that, if set to 0, a write will be allowed if the key doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So let's do that. Okay. So now that we've got that, then I can also do a Vault KV get, payments, processor, QA, right? And so if you are looking at this from like a sort of a Vault for developer interface, something that's a little more straightforward, all you might get is just like, here's your project, here's your application, and here's the secrets. You just store the secret in there. There's no paths for you to be thinking about. There's no if you've got an abstraction in front of Vault, then you might not see any of this, and you might not interact with this way, right? But at the very least, what you do know is that underneath it all, this is how you would interact with Vault. So you get foobar. All right. So now I did promise API. There is an API, and I should probably pull up the API reference. While I do that, there is it's mostly REST compliant. I'll pull up the screen for this. Okay, there we go. So there is a Vault API. I will drop them into the chat. There we go. Okay, and I'll pull that up. So it's right here. They are prefixed with routes and things like that. The first thing that you will do is that if you are doing this in your application, like I said, not all frameworks have an SDK for Vault. So if you find that you need to do this in your application, you need to write some code to make the API request. The first thing you will have to do is authenticate. And you will not necessarily in your application be authenticating with the human user. You'll be using the machine identity that the application is running on. In short, if you're running on something like an AWS EC2 instance, you'd be using an EC2 instance metadata. You wouldn't be using your own past login password for it. There are other options if you don't have like a machine identity tied to where your application is running. A good example of this is maybe you're running it on your local machine for some reason for testing. Then yes, you would need to use your user authentication in order to get a token so that you can pass it into the authorization API HTTP header. But that's only for local development. Don't do that when you're actually running in production. I see you laughing, Michael. Clearly someone has done this before.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen people use token auth in production. Yeah, you typically want to do something like Kubernetes auth, AWS auth, Apple auth, anything like that, where under the hood, it is doing token auth at the end of the day, but there's that higher level abstraction there for you. Because again, as I mentioned, Vault tokens don't last forever.
No.
They will eventually expire. So if you give your application a Vault token, just the raw Vault token, it will eventually expire. and then
you're like, what happened? I thought I had it all. I thought I did it. I thought I set it up properly. And then you're like, no, it has there's no way to off do it. I'm turning off the screen share because I'm pasting my personal access token because gotcha. I lost the token. So we're going to go back. Okay. So I needed this token here. I'm just going to save it into a Vault token. By the way, you'll see this later on in other parts of the series, but there are three, there are more, but there are roughly 3 important environment variables that you will probably need to know and set in your application. The Vault token, Vault _ ADDR, and Vault _ namespace. Those are pretty much standard to Vault itself. So if you do want to authenticate to Vault by CLI, or you do have an SDK that you're using that integrates with Vault, typically it will standardize on those 3 environment variables to make sure that you're authenticating properly to Vault. So do keep that in mind. But yeah, Vault token, I'm just storing this token temporarily because we are going to be doing an API call. So I'm going to reference my API to authenticate to it. But once I've gotten the the token back, I can use the same approach to basically make API calls. Once you do a login, though, what I will tell you is once you do a login, you probably will do it by CLI just to get the token first. You can do it by API. There's nothing wrong with it. Like for you to go do an API to the login endpoint and then get the token back. But more than likely, if you're doing some local testing with your application, you'll probably just do this login, get the Vault token, and then use it for any subsequent calls. But yes, there is an API as well for authenticating to Vault in the first place. Unless I'm missing something, Michael, but I don't.
No, that's correct.
All right, so X Vault is usually the prefix for a lot of the headers. So I will be putting in the token. I'm not going to try to type it because it's too long.
And I see why you saved it.
I saved it in here because I don't feel like typing it. And if you are in HCP Vault or Vault Enterprise, you do need to set the namespace. In this case, it's admin, but you do need to set the namespace, and then I will get from HTTP. Well, I have Vault address stored, so I don't have to worry about that. The Vault address, B1, and it was payments, processor, dev, payments, processor, dev. Payments, and remember, there is a data path.
Data.
Oh, lovely. Where is it? Payments. Sorry, I'm just trying to double check. Processor. I actually think I need to put data, right? Data, processor.
Yes.
Dev.
I think that looks right. Let's see.
Yeah.
First time's the charm.
Look at that. So, just because no one can see it. All right, there we go.
We like colorful output. Yeah.
Yeah, we like colorful output and formatted output. So you'll see that this comes back in a JSON response. It has the data, it has database username, database password, and the token, and it is indeed giving me back the second version. The API documentation will tell you how if there are parameter or path parameters that you can add for different versions, for example. I will pull it up and see if I can find the documentation for that. The API, can I do the path? Secrets engines, key value version 2. And you can, you can use the post config, a compost to update things. You can do, I think, patch for patching a existing secret version, things like that too.
Right. I think you can put just a question mark version equals and then your version number.
That's what I think too. Question mark version equals 1.
What is that?
No. Did I do that wrong? Do I not have version 1 for dev? I think I do. No matches found. Let me see. Read secret subkeys. That's not it. This is when you're looking at the API documentation for this. Get version. No, it's a question mark. All right. Version equals version 0. It's not version 0, is it? Version 0. Unless there's something I am missing. Let me see if I can. It could be the let's get this. Okay, there we go. That's why it's not.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now that we've gotten that, you'll notice that is the version 1, and it will be the super secret testing Postgres, right? Everything else. So this is version 1. I think those are the most important things to know about retrieving secrets by API and retrieving secrets by CLI. One of the things that I will say is that this API request is not always going to be the same. You'll have dynamic secrets in which you'll have a different API path. And again, if you are in an organization that has set up abstractions or different interface in front of Vault, you may never see any of this and you may never need any of this. But if you are using your application and you want to get a secret from Vault and you don't have an SDK available for your framework, then you can use an API request. You can create the API request to Vault to retrieve the secret that you need, and you can choose which version that you want as well. I think that's the pretty fast introduction for a developer if you are using Vault. Michael, is there anything that I've missed in this between the CLI, the API, and authenticating to Vault as a human user?
I will say that there is, when you're doing the CLI, there is a special flag that you can put that can help you get the API command.
Oh,
do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's do that. I can't remember it though.
Yeah, so if you do, I think it's, so do a standard like Vault KV get, and then get your secret. So like we're doing our normal CLI command for our secret. And then if you hit enter, that should pull our secret. Okay, we can get our secret. Now, if you do the same command, but before or after the get, do dash output dash curl dash string.
Oh yeah, that's right. There we go.
And there you go. So that way, I like to do this because while we do have the documentation out there, that's a good reference. If I already know how to do the CLI command, then I'll just throw on that dash output curl string flag, and then it kind of just converts it to the API for you.
Nice. Yeah. Very convenient. I always forget this exists because I always end up looking at the API docs first.
Yes, they're very helpful. The API docs are very helpful, especially for things like, oh, I need a specific version. What are the fields? What are the flags? But if you do have, or if you don't know the proper CLI command, well, then you're having to look at docs anyway.
Yeah.
But if you already know the CLI command, I think throwing that flag on there is really good.
Yeah. That's very useful, especially if you are using some of the other secrets engines, right? We're just showing key value, but there are other secrets engines out there that have more complicated API requests, and it makes it a little bit harder to reverse engineer the API request if you're looking at the API docs and there's so many options and so many fields. So if you're doing like PKI, which is the certificate secrets engine, and as a developer, you may or may not be interacting directly with it, but you may find that you have to, just because you may need a certificate for something. You might find that it's a little bit more complicated to set up and a little bit more complicated of an API request. So you might want to do this CLI call instead to make it easier on yourself, and then reverse engineer the API request from that. Yeah, so that was the overview of how you store a secret in Vault. Without going too deeply into Vault itself, today, at least if you're a developer and you're tuning in, we went through how you create a secret in Vault, how you authenticate to Vault as a human user, how you create a secret in Vault, and then all of the possibilities that you do have. You can version, you can delete the old version. You have the CLI or API requests that you can make to retrieve that secret if you cannot figure out how to integrate it into your application. But there are more elegant ways to do it. There are less complicated ways to do it, ways that are less effort, that require less effort and less API reverse engineering on your behalf as a developer. If you're a platform team, I guess we should probably talk about what are some important things lessons learned about how development teams interact with Vault, but try to keep it simple. If you are offering an interface, most folks start with key value secrets engine. So you want an interface around the key value secrets engine. And you'll want to offer development teams a kind of landing zone. So be opinionated about sort of an initial set of secrets engines that they're allowed to use, and be opinionated about how you're segmenting their access between development teams and environments too. Anything I missed, Michael?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. I know this live stream in this series is all on kind of that developer focus. And at the start of the call, you mentioned that we do have another series. If you are a platform person or on a platform team, we do have another series where we previously walked through kind of the steps that are needed and required for the platform specific. But again, we're trying to focus in on the developer, which can be a little hard because every organization is different. As you mentioned, some organizations allow direct access to Vault, and others kind of put like a landing zone or a developer portal in front of Vault. So it can be a little challenging kind of going through the developer steps here because every organization is different. But this one was just a simple KV pulling static secrets here.
Yeah. We are going to show the more important, I guess, developer part, which is how it gets into your application and what behaviors your application should be aware of. That will be the next part. So we're going to show Spring Cloud Vault, which is for Spring Boot applications, because I think that's the best example of an end-to-end library that supports how applications should be retrieving and handling secrets from Vault, especially accounting for rotation and dynamic secrets. We're also going to talk about what options you have if you aren't a Spring Boot application, what patterns that you should be thinking about considering. We'll talk about Vault Agent, which is agnostic to the application framework, and we'll also probably talk about Vault Proxy, which is a way for your application to authenticate to Vault without necessarily caring what that authentication sequence is. So we'll talk more about that, and that I think will be more important from a developer perspective. If you're looking at Vault and you're saying, maybe I need to refactor my application, that will provide more information on how to refactor. But this is an introduction as to how you might change your secrets in Vault and how you might interact with it, especially as you get started. Okay. Anything else, Michael, before we close out?
No, I don't think so. I'm excited about our next videos in the series about actually, integrating Vault into your applications there. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So that will be fun to cover. And
will we do it in 1 hour? I don't know.
that is the question. But I will say, as you mentioned, Spring Boot, that is a great way to do native kind of Vault capabilities directly into your application. I'm personally excited for that.
Yeah. And in terms of the other parts of the series, if you're tuning in, we will be going every week in March, every Monday in March. So tune in. It'll be the same time, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern, and we'll be going every Monday in March. I guess you can call it like Vault Mondays.
Secrets Management March Mondays.
I don't know. We'll find a catchier title. And then our last episode will be March 31st. And that will be all about Kubernetes, because we get a lot of people who say, I'm a developer and I do things on Kubernetes, so please review it for me. So we will be doing Kubernetes, but everything else is going to be focused around what happens in your application, patterns that you should be thinking about, patterns that your Vault team might help you set up so it's a little easier. So we'll go from secrets injection to secrets syncing, and then to rotating and dynamic secrets. How do you handle that in your application? All right, with that, thank you all for tuning in. If you missed this episode and you want to see other episodes, we will have this on a playlist. Stay tuned for a short link in future episodes, but this will be on its own playlist in YouTube on the HashiCorp channel. Thanks. I hope you learned something, and enjoy keeping your secret secret. Is that a good one?
What a great outro.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday.
Bye.